Josepha and Jenna, thank you both so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Of course, anytime. So I want to start broad, and I will go to you first, Jenna, because some people watching around the state may not be too interested or connected to this race. Who are we looking at as the front runners as we go into the primary?
Okay, so we are, well, depending on who you ask, who we're looking at as front runners. Based on the last debate, we have at least 5 people who are front runners, and that would be Scott Stringer. He was the city comptroller or controller. I get the two titles confused between Albany and New York, but he manages the money. That's one of the jobs. Then we also have Eric Adams. He is a former, for people around the state might know him as a former state senator, also a former New York City police officer. He held that job for 20 years, and apparently that is the reason why he should be mayor. Another name people might recognize is Andrew Yang. He, of course, very famously ran for president of the United States, gathered together what he refers to as the Yang Gang, and sort of touts himself as an advocate for people who are impoverished or struggling with poverty, and wants to create a basic income for individuals. We also should not forget there is Catherine Garcia. She is not as fancy as some of the other candidates, and I say that because her campaign is very much focused on her history as managing the city's Department of Sanitation. Ergo, she is a manager, and she is going to come in and manage this city, which is, you know, a massive budget, so many departments. She has experience in that, and that is what has really been the crux of her campaign. And then, of course, we cannot forget Maya Wiley. She, some people might recognize her from being a contributor on MSNBC. She's also a civil rights lawyer. She was the chairperson of the Civilian Complaint Review Board, I believe. But most importantly, this campaign has focused on her being counsel to Mayor de Blasio. She's also seen as one of the more, if not most, progressive candidates in the race.
So let's start with Andrew Yang. Josepha, at the start of this race, when Andrew Yang jumped into it, I immediately thought, there's no chance. You know, he ran for president, but obviously he has name recognition, but will New Yorkers go for him? And then he took the lead in the polls. Do we know why New Yorkers were so quick to support him? And is that support really, is he maintaining that support heading into the primary?
So Andrew Yang has actually done fairly consistently well in all the polls that we've seen so far. And it goes to what you said, Dan, it's name recognition. A lot of people know who he is. They recognize him from, you know, running for president. The thing that throws a wrench into everything that's happening is that New York City, for the first time, is going to do this thing called ranked choice voting, where voters are going to get a ballot and they get to pick from the slate of candidates and rank them 1 through 5. Right now, the polls have been sort of wishy-washy because no one really knows what's going to happen with ranked choice voting. Just in the last couple of weeks, you saw Diana Morales, who is a nonprofit executive. Her campaign completely imploded. So, and just this past week alone, you had Eric Adams, who's the leading contender, have his campaign be questioned because of where he may or may not live. So
this is the weirdest thing.
It's very bizarre, but there's so much time between now and the primary for things to just get completely thrown for a loop.
So I think it's fair to say that Eric Adams has come up in the polls, at least in the last recent polls that I've seen. Jenna, what's the appeal of Eric Adams? It seems like he is going for the I've been a cop, I want to clean up crime type of thing. Is that a priority for people living in New York City right now? Is that the top thing that they're looking at, you think?
Well, I would say it is a very big, important concern. New York still, in terms of, I guess you would say per capita or something, does have a low crime rate, but there has been a significant and sharp increase in violent crime. And I really want to emphasize on violent crime in the city as it sort of emerges from COVID lockdowns, et cetera. That very understandably has a lot of people shaken and jittery. And so that is a top priority. And yes, he is leaning very heavily on his history of 20 years being a cop, walking the beat in New York City as his credentials for being able to address this issue.
And I want to go to Scott Stringer next with you, Josepha. So Scott Stringer was thought to be a front runner, a possible challenger to Andrew Yang on the ticket, and then he was accused of sexual harassment. Do you think that's enough to tank his campaign heading into the primary?
It's possible. I mean, you had one former campaign worker, it's unclear whether she was an intern or whether she was a volunteer, who accused Scott of sexual harassment some 20 odd years ago. Scott said that they were in a consensual, relationship. But after those allegations emerged, all of this progressive support that Scott had has been withdrawn because no one wants to, be associated with that. And as a result, Scott has been on the defense for the last few weeks. All of his endorsements have sort of crumbled beneath him. So, yeah, I mean, Scott Stringer's campaign really is struggling to stay afloat and trying to get people to rank him, which is, again, ranked choice voting is really going to be the thing to look out for here.
I think this sounds so fun, ranked choice voting, being able to pick your 1, 2, 3. It just sounds like a fun time to me. But I want to go to Kathryn Garcia with you, Jenna. So she was is it commissioner of sanitation that she was?
Yes.
So is that, I get that it's a management role, but do you think that voters are maybe put off by that because sanitation is trash, I guess what's her appeal to voters? Is it just that management experience?
Well, I do think that the management experience is a big appeal and something that she's really touting. New Yorkers, I think a lot of people at this point are pretty just exacerbated with the de Blasio administration and some of what they see as mismanagement or missed opportunities or mishandling of things. And what I kind of get from at least my read on New Yorkers is that there's really a hunger for somebody who's going to create calm and normalcy. And so that's what she's really trying to push with her management experience. But I also do want to circle back and say that, yeah, in a city like New York, getting your trash picked up regularly and on time is a big, big deal.
Yeah. If it piles up, you don't want to be there.
No,
in New York City.
And not in the summertime. Good Lord, no.
No. So let's round it out with Maya Wiley. I want to go to you, Josefa. So she worked in the de Blasio administration. De Blasio isn't everyone's favorite mayor. Is that going to dissuade voters from voting for her, do you think? Or do you think that she is building up this progressive base that might give her some support?
So she's really been trying to cast herself away from Bill de Blasio because, like you said, he's become everyone's favorite punching bag over the last couple of years. So while she was, his chief counsel at some point, she was also the head of the Civilian Complaint Review Board, which oversees the NYPD, that has come under fire in, the last year. In the last year or so, over, aggressive tactics with protesters. But even back when she was the head of the CCRB, there have been, questions about whether or not she was actually independent of the mayor's office or whether she was carrying their water on this oversight board. But she has tried to pitch herself in a new light of, I am a civil rights lawyer. For the last year or so, she's been a commentator on MSNBC, I believe, and really trying to build up her progressive credentials. But it's still unclear whether or not she can distinguish herself among this slate of people running, especially when you do have what's likely going to be a low turnout election. Let's be really honest. People don't necessarily vote all that much in non-presidential years. So it's going to be, a fascinating thing to see who comes out to vote and who they rank at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And Jenna, I had mentioned that de Blasio is not everybody's favorite mayor, but has he gotten involved in the race at all? Has he given any indication as to who he would support for the next mayor? He can't run again because of term limits.
Of course. Although despite what the prior mayor managed to do, Mike Bloomberg. So thus far, not yet. One would assume that based on the campaign that he ran, that he would be endorsing the more progressive candidate, the person who was his counsel in his own administration, but that has yet to officially happen. He may also be staying out of this because, as you guys have both pointed out, he's become the punching bag and is something of a lightning rod, and that maybe people don't want his endorsement. But yeah, we've yet to hear anything officially from him.
And Josepha, I want to end on you. The other big politician in the state is the governor. We had a little bit of a surprise where Andrew Yang says that he has spoken with the governor, but has Governor Cuomo played it all in this race? Has he spoken about any candidates? What should we know there?
So every time the governor is asked about this, he goes on this long rant about how the mayoral candidates need to focus on crime, what they're going to do to stop crime, what they're going to do with the subways. So he hasn't actually endorsed anyone yet. And again, the governor has been accused of sexual harassment by several former aides and current aides. So he's a bit toxic too. It's not necessary that people want his endorsement. At one of the previous debates, the candidates were asked who would accept Andrew Cuomo's endorsement. And the only people that raised their hand, I think, were Andrew Yang and Eric Adams. So again, it's not necessarily clear if anyone even wants their name attached to him. He used to wield a tremendous amount of power in New York, and now people are sort of distancing themselves.
It's going to be really interesting to see how that turns out, because if the governor's the governor next year and whoever's elected as the mayor, it'll be really interesting to see the relationship that they have. But I think that covers it for the primary, so we'll leave it there. Josepha Velasquez from the nonprofit news organization The City, and Jenna Flanagan from WNET's Metro Focus. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.